Welcome inside the War Room. I'm your host, Andrew Valancourt, and we are back today for episode 13 of the Dynasty War Room podcast. Today's show is a big one as we are doing our final rookie rankings following the completion of the 2024 NFL Draft, which was held in Detroit over the weekend. And we have a lot of players to talk about. Today we will do our best to get through the first two rounds of a 12-team Superflex rookie draft and get a feel for where everybody should be ranked now that we actually have landing spots and draft capital and everything that we need to know before drafting these players. So before we launch into that, I just want to remind you all, go follow us on Twitter at Dynasty War Room. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel as well at the same handle. And if you've missed any of our previous episodes where we broke down position by position the rookies before the draft, or anything else that we've gone over this offseason, you can find those on pretty much any platform that carries podcasts, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, Amazon, you name it, we're out there. So go give us a follow and a 5-star review on your platform of choice. We very much appreciate it. And we're just going to jump right into things here. We got a lot of players to get through, and we're going to discuss rookie rankings both by their ranking, 1 through 12, but also by tier. So tier-based drafting is very important. It can be particularly helpful in some of these rookie drafts when you start getting further down the list of players, and a few guys might all be in the same type of bucket, whether it's, same position or cross positions. And you can use this to trade down, move up, know when you're at the last player in a given tier, can help make some of those tough decisions a little bit easier for you. So we're going to first start off with tier 1, which for me has 3 players in it. And that is starting at number 1, Caleb Williams. I think he's the no-brainer 101 in 12-team rookie Superflex drafts. My typical fantasy league for Dynasty is also with tight end premium, usually an extra half point for tight end receptions. So that is the context for today's rankings in this show, just to keep that in mind. For single quarterback leagues or 10-team leagues or even 8-team leagues, anything smaller than 12, these will be a little bit different. I don't necessarily know, certainly not in a one-quarterback league. So let's start there. In a one-quarterback league, you can just push all these quarterbacks down. I think Caleb Williams probably in my eyes would drop from the number 1 slot down to, I think probably 5 or 6, maybe even 7, somewhere in that range. But in a 10-team league or smaller, I think you can still take Marvin Harrison over Caleb Williams in a Superflex league. But in a 12-team Superflex, 14-team league, anything bigger, 12 or bigger, Caleb Williams has got to be locked in there at the 101, and he went to the Chicago Bears as everyone expected, and I don't think there's a lot really to say about this. He's in a great landing spot, full of strong receivers. They drafted Rome Odunze with the 9th pick, and that certainly is helpful for them. So between Odunze and Keenan Allen, who they just acquired, DJ Moore, they still have Cole Kmet, an improved offensive line. This is a good, solid offense. They signed DeAndre Swift out of the backfield, so a lot to like for Caleb Williams, who checks in at number 1 in my rankings. At number 2, also in tier 1, is going to be Marvin Harrison Jr. As we just mentioned, depending on your league format, he could be the 101 in your league. But again, in a standard 12-team league, Marvin Harrison Jr. checks in at number 2. He went 4th overall to the Arizona Cardinals, and this is pretty much the perfect landing spot for him. He's going to be the clear number 1 receiver on this team from day one. There's not really going to be much competition for him in terms of targets. Trey McBride is going to be a very good tight end. I like him a lot in Dynasty, but Marvin Harrison is going to be the instant alpha at receiver on that team. Michael Wilson, will take a back seat. You have Greg Dortch in the slot, but nothing to be afraid of there. So Marvin Harrison Jr., I think, is a little bit safer than Malik Neighbors, who we're going to talk about in a minute. And that's why I do have Harrison Jr. above Malik Neighbors. I think he gives you a good combination of, first-year production, but incredibly high ceiling. He's someone that I see staying as a top 5, top 6 dynasty wide receiver overall over the next several years. He's probably going to be assuming he has a very strong rookie season, he will probably jump into that top 4 with Justin Jefferson and CeeDee Lamb, Jamar Chase, Amon-Ra St. Brown. I imagine that he will slot into that group somewhere if he has the type of rookie season that we're all hoping for. And he's going to be just one of those guys that you can build your team around in Dynasty. Next up at number 3, and the last player in my first tier of rankings is going to be Malik Nabers, wide receiver. He goes to the New York Giants with the 6th overall pick in the draft. And this is where I think the draft is going to begin for most of you in your rookie drafts, just because I think there is going to be some, difference of opinion here about whether you should be going Jaden Daniels or, whether you should stay there and go with the wide receiver. For me, this is a situation where I like the other quarterbacks in this class. I frankly like all of the quarterbacks, all 6, but especially the top 4 in my mind, which would be Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, JJ McCarthy, Drake May. I like all 4 of those guys, but I do think that just statistically speaking, there's a better chance that those players bust than Malik Nabers. Malik Nabers is a very high-level wide receiver. He'd be the clear number 1 player at the wide receiver position in almost any draft class in recent memory. Just incredible production profile. He meets every analytical box that you'd want to check off. Great film. I mean, there's nothing really bad to say about Malik Nabers. And so, in terms of him being the 3rd or the 4th player off the board, I think 3 is where I would take him in nearly every league. The only situation where maybe you go Jaden Daniels is if you are truly a team that just really lacks a strong quarterback. Especially if you don't have any quarterbacks. If you're someone that's just undergone a huge rebuild process and you just don't have anybody that you can count on at that quarterback position, or you're just absolutely loaded at wide receiver, you can take that into account. But generally speaking, we do want to draft for the best player available, the best talent, the best value, not just, what position do I need the most. Quarterback is really the one spot where you can, let team needs leak into that analysis a little bit more. But I'm a little bit more scared of the bust factor with Jaden Daniels. And so that's why I think Malik Nabers is just a safer prospect. He's going to be the clear-cut number 1 receiver on his team. Daniel Jones, is going to have a lot to prove this year. And he's either going to figure it out and, they're going to form a nice connection because let's face it, he's never had a receiver, like Malik Nabers. I mean, this is not going to be, this isn't a Sterling Shepard or, Wan'Dale Robinson type of situation. Malik Nabers is a stud. And if Daniel Jones can't cut it, the Giants will be in the market for a quarterback next year, where whether it's the draft and they have a high-end rookie, presumably a top 5 pick, or they will be active on the veteran quarterback market and make something happen to where they have an upgrade over Daniel Jones. So I'm not particularly worried about that. If you're a contender and you're hoping for a huge rookie season on Malik Nabers, I think you're going to get a good season, but I don't think it's going to be quite to the level of Marvin Harrison. So this is maybe a guy that in redraft leagues I'm not taking very highly, but we got months and months before we have to worry about that. I love his outlook for Dynasty, and that's why I have him in the same tier as Marvin Harrison and Caleb Williams. Next up at number 4, we have the beginning of tier 2. So I have 4 guys in tier number 2, which is a slight change. I do have a separation now between my 7th and 8th picks based on how the draft went. But we'll start with number 4, and this is going to be the start of the quarterback run. And I have Jaden Daniels at number 4. He went 2nd overall to the Washington Commanders. And this is somebody that, there are some red flags in his profile given his older age and, just extended time in college. Wasn't very good at Arizona State. Took transferring to LSU for him to kind of break out. And then obviously everyone saw that huge Heisman season this past year. But I think the thing that really separates Jaden Daniels from the other quarterback prospects in this class is his rushing upside. We talked a lot about this on the quarterback preview episode a couple weeks ago, where if Jaden Daniels can, be an average to above average passer in the NFL, he is going to break fantasy football because he's going to run for 1,000 yards every season. I mean, he's going to give you a great rushing floor. This is someone that is, exactly the type of player that you're looking for in Dynasty. And I think getting him at the 4th pick in your draft is a good value. There will certainly be people that choose to take him at number 3, and I don't fault you for that. I think me placing him at 4 just goes to show how highly of a prospect I think Malik Nabers is and how much I believe in him as a player. But I like Jaden Daniels, and I think it's a good spot for him. I do think that he is a little bit more volatile. You do have to be a little bit worried about, the bust factor with the quarterback position. And, this type of quarterback that relies so heavily on the run game, we've seen players kind of come in flashes, but we haven't really seen a lot of guys in recent years that have been able to, make it last. We saw obviously with Justin Fields. I think I likened Jaden Daniels to somewhere in between a Justin Fields and a Lamar Jackson. I don't think he's going to flame out as quickly as Justin Fields, but I also don't know that he's going to reach the type of ceiling of a Lamar Jackson. I think he's somewhere in between, which for fantasy, that's great. I mean, people, rag on Justin Fields for, how he performed in terms of helping his team win and being a quarterback that teams can be successful with. But when it came to fantasy football, Justin Fields was great. And, everyone knows how good Lamar Jackson is. So I think that tells you everything you need to know about Jaden Daniels and, the type of player he can be for your team. Not to mention the fact that he does have some pretty decent weapons with Terry McLaurin and, depending on your opinion of Jahan Dotson, but they did just draft Ben Sinnott at tight end. So there are some pieces there. And so that's why he comes in at number 4 in my rankings. Next up at number 5, also in tier 2, I'm going to go with J.J. McCarthy. He went 10th overall to the Minnesota Vikings. And there's going to be a lot of people that certainly have Drake May over J.J. McCarthy. But I think that McCarthy is just a little bit safer of a player. I think he's a little bit of a cleaner prospect. He didn't throw the ball quite to the same level in college as these other quarterbacks did. But this is a guy that is very accurate. He's mobile. He can run. He's just a really smart player. He's young. He's only 21 years old. All he does is win. And he walks into a really, really good situation, which I think is the ultimate tiebreaker here for me, because he goes to a team in Minnesota where he's got the best wide receiver in the NFL with Justin Jefferson. He's got a talented rookie in Jordan Addison and TJ Hawkinson at the tight end position. And he's going to have some weapons on that offense. I mean, Aaron Jones, even out of the backfield, can catch passes. And they're playing in a division with some other very good offensive teams. I mean, this is going to be 6 games a year that Minnesota is going to have to throw the ball around to keep up. I mean, the Lions have a great offense. We saw the Packers offense take major steps forward. And now Chicago with Caleb Williams and their, new stack of wide receivers, that's going to be a good offense too. So I think this is a really, really good landing spot. I like the coaching staff there. I think this is a perfect scenario for J.J. McCarthy, and that's why I have him at number 5 in my rookie rankings. Next up, at number 6, I have Drake May. As I just talked about, quarterbacks, very important here in Dynasty, and while there will be people that take May over McCarthy, I think that there's a little bit more of a question mark with Drake May. I think he's a little bit more of a boom-bust type of player. He certainly walks into a lesser situation than McCarthy by going to New England, but he did get the draft capital, 3rd overall pick, so New England had that same exact choice between these two guys, and they went with Drake May. And they did give him some help at the wide receiver department later in the draft, taking Jalen Polk in the 2nd round, and then going with Javon Baker in the 4th round. So there will be some new weapons there. They don't lack a clear wide receiver 1, but solid running game. And this is the team that, playing against some high level offenses, they're going to have to throw the ball. And he's got all the tools. He's a big dude, powerful arm, and he's mobile as well. So I think what's so good about this quarterback class is that all 4 of the top prospects, they can run the ball. They give you that rushing floor and have very high ceilings. So in that sense, this is a guy that I think in a lot of years would be going, 2 or 3 in rookie drafts. And to get him, in this 5, 6, 7, 8 range where I think he's going to be going in your rookie drafts, is great value. So I have him slotted in at number 6 and the third player in tier 2. My final player in tier 2, checking in at number 7, is wide receiver Rome Odunze. He ended up going 9th overall to the Chicago Bears, and this is someone that I think is just uber talented, right? I mean, great top 3 group of wide receivers. Everyone's been talking about it all offseason, and the only reason that I have him at 7 and not higher, well, 2 main reasons. Number one is, there is some of that positional value that you can debate, but I think having 3 top 10 quarterbacks, 4 top 10 quarterbacks, obviously when you factor in Caleb Williams, but 3 other quarterbacks that are right in the same range, I think that certainly affects where Odunze goes. But he ends up, while it might be a good situation in real life, I think for fantasy football, it's a slightly worse situation by going to Chicago. His rookie year, I would expect him to be somewhat, similar to like a JSN situation from last year where, competing for a lot more targets, maybe isn't, doesn't get the volume that we would love to see his rookie season, because Keenan Allen is going to eat up targets. DJ Moore is going to get a ton of targets. Cole Kmet is going to get some. It's going to be a crowded offense. So that might change in a year or 2 down the line. Keenan Allen is not going to be there long term, but something to keep in mind. And I do think that we might see some, his value is going to hold. I would fully expect it to hold after year 1, but he might not be somebody whose value just skyrockets unless he really, breaks out early and is able to take a, huge target, chunk away from some of those other guys, which I just don't know how realistic that is. But could be a very good situation long term as long as Caleb Williams hits. And so from that aspect and being in a very good offense, in theory, I think that this is a solid spot, and getting him at 7 is a steal. And I just had to make this decision actually in my first rookie draft of the season. We had a few leagues already going. I'm recording this on Sunday, April 28th, and I had the decision to make between J.J. McCarthy and Rome Odunze for a team that, equally could have used a quarterback or a wide receiver. I did go with J.J. McCarthy. So, I'm sticking with these rankings, and I think that Rome Odunze is a great value at number 7, but if you're a team that could use a QB, I would stick with McCarthy or May ahead of Rome Odunze. Now, starting tier number 3, which is only going to be a 2-man tier, and number 8 overall in my rankings, I am going to stay with Brock Bowers, tight end out of Georgia, who went to the Raiders in the first round at 13 overall, and just an incredible prospect, right? We've talked at length last week's episode in particular on the tight end preview, just how good of a prospect Brock Bowers is. But this is not a great landing spot, neither from a quarterback situation or a competition standpoint. The Raiders just took Michael Mayer last year at the early part of the second round, showed some flashes. I think a lot of people were excited for Michael Mayer. That excitement should take a big hit. Brock Bowers is the better prospect. He is almost certainly going to play above Michael Mayer. I don't know why the Raiders would take Brock Bowers if they did not plan on putting Bowers on the field over Michael Mayer. So just keep that in mind. You got to kind of let go of some of the things that happened last year in these types of situations because, Vegas clearly saw a generational prospect and they didn't want to pass that up. So, all the quarterbacks at that point were off the board. So they went with what they felt was the best player available. And it wouldn't surprise me if we see Brock Bowers get split out wide as a receiver a decent amount. Maybe you'll see some sets where both Mayer and Bowers play together. We've seen that certainly be successful for several teams over the years. So, unfortunately, year 1's probably not going to be great. But typically there is a bit of a learning curve for rookies. We were a little bit spoiled with Sam Laporta coming in and even some of the other rookies that kind of, had some bright moments. Dalton Kincaid was another one. But Brock Bowers, presumably the Raiders will figure out their quarterback position next year because they weren't able to do it in the draft this season. So it's probably going to be Gardner Minshew that leads that team this year. So, a fine bridge quarterback, high level backup, but certainly not, an elite level option. So that is why Brock Bowers comes in at number 8, even in tight end premium leagues, which again, that's what these rankings are built for. I don't know how you can take Bowers over Rome Odunze at this point. Coming in at number 9, and the second player in tier 3 is Xavier Worthy, wide receiver, going to the Kansas City Chiefs with the 28th overall pick. He was acquired in a trade up on draft night, and we really couldn't have picked a better landing spot for Xavier Worthy. I mean, speed kills at the wide receiver position in today's modern NFL, and Kansas City knows how to use that speed. They clearly have a type at that position. We saw it with Tyreek Hill. Even some of the other guys that they have taken that, second or, later round prospects. They took MVS, who's a speed guy, in free agency a few years ago. So they like this type of player, and Worthy had a very good production profile, broke out as a true freshman at Texas. And while he certainly is a little bit smaller, there are definitely some weight concerns. He's obviously very fast, broke the combine record, and he should fit in very nicely in this offense. The Chiefs went from Rashee Rice and a bunch of nobodies to, Hollywood Brown, Xavier Worthy, and now Rashee Rice is a little bit of a question mark because it's likely that he'll be suspended for at least a handful of games this fall. But this is a very nice situation. Hollywood Brown's only on a 1-year deal, and Worthy is going to be there, for the foreseeable future. And what quarterback would you rather be paired with than Patrick Mahomes? So I think the 109 spot in drafts just, skyrocketed in value. And frankly, the late first and early second, I think you can go all the way out to maybe like the 204, 205 type of range where, the value of those picks, I think, rose a lot over the draft. We had a lot of players go at the end of the first, beginning of the second, that were skill position players. So we love to see that. And Xavier Worthy kicks off sort of that, next group of players, because everyone knew all season, hey, there's a clear top 8. But now I think that that line is a little bit blended. And I think the entire first round is very, very strong. So starting at tier number 4 and coming in at number 10 in my rankings is going to be Brian Thomas Jr., wide receiver. He went to Jacksonville with the 23rd overall pick, and Jacksonville traded back a few spots and still was able to select Brian Thomas. And, they certainly were looking for another offensive weapon. Christian Kirk, I still think, is the wide receiver 1 there. Evan Engram is a very solid and productive tight end, but Brian Thomas Jr. is going to take over the Calvin Ridley role, and it has all the makings to be a very good offense if Trevor Lawrence can take another step, and pretty good draft capital as well, obviously going in the first round, so which everyone expected, but still always good to see because you never know what can happen on draft night. But Brian Thomas Jr. I think slides in and is a very valuable 10th overall pick. I think, again, this is a very strong draft class, particularly in the first round. So Brian Thomas Jr. kicks off the start of what I view as a 4-man tier in the late first. Next up in that list, coming in at number 11, is quarterback Bo Nix, who went 12th overall to the Denver Broncos. And this is a player that I did not think was going to go in the first round. I think he was probably, by most people, projected as a 1-2 turn type of player. Maybe somebody trades in and takes him at the back of the first, but from a talent standpoint, I thought he was more of a second round guy. But Denver took him at 12th overall. There was that huge run of quarterbacks to start the draft, and the connections are there. People have talked about how Sean Payton likes these, accurate throwers, and that's what Bo Nix is. He's an accurate passer. He's not a super high-level athlete, but he can move a little bit in the pocket. He can pick up a few rushing yards here and there, and he had a really good final season at Oregon. So, good spot. And how often are you able to get a top 15 quarterback from the NFL draft this late in a rookie draft? I mean, 11th overall, is incredible value for a quarterback who should, at a minimum, start for the next 2 years for Denver. And he's paired up with his teammate from college, Troy Franklin, who they took at the very beginning of the 4th round. So a lot to like in terms of landing spot here. He still has Cortland Sutton to throw to, Marvin Mims. Javonte Williams is a nice pass catcher out of the backfield. And again, another team that has been at the bottom of their division standings in recent years, and they're going to have to throw the ball in a division with Kansas City. And, I expect the Chargers to improve offensively and the Raiders. So like the landing spot. I think it's a little bit of a reach, of course, by the Broncos. But, hey, when it comes to fantasy football, we have to just react to what the NFL tells us they think of these players. And the Broncos think very highly of Bo Nix. So I think he is a safely will slide into the late first round of your rookie drafts. At number 12 and the final spot in the first round of a rookie 12-team draft, I have Jonathan Brooks, running back, the first running back in these rankings. He went 46th overall in the second round to the Carolina Panthers, and this was a tough decision, slotting in who should go 12, who should go 13, 14, etc. There's a few guys here all in the mix, but running backs are so valuable in Dynasty, and it's difficult because they have a very short shelf life. Most running backs don't get a second contract. Those that do, they start to go downhill pretty quickly after that. And everyone always needs running backs, right? I mean, you look around your league, every single team, even go look at, your defending champion and the teams that made the playoffs last year in your league. I'm sure they have a guy or two, but everyone always is looking to add a running back. And I think the scarcity in this draft class, we really did not get a lot of good landing spots for these prospects, nor did we get very strong draft capital. There are a few guys that certainly went on day 2, but even those guys that did go in the third round, not exactly great landing spots, and we'll talk about some of those players soon. But Jonathan Brooks is really the only one that just slam dunk, went to a place where, if healthy, he can take over the starting job relatively quickly, and he got top 50 draft capital, so that's always nice to see. Carolina traded up for him. There was a lot of talk that Dallas would have really have liked to take Jonathan Brooks, and they were not able to do so. That's a whole nother story that we'll save for another show about what Dallas is going to do at the running back position. But Jonathan Brooks is going to get a lot of carries in Carolina. They added a lot of pass catchers. That offense should be significantly better than it was last season. And so I'm willing to take the chance on Jonathan Brooks at the 12th pick in the draft. And the last player in Tier 4, coming in at number 13 in my ranks, is Ladd McConkey, wide receiver. He went to the LA Chargers with the 34th overall pick at the very beginning of round 2. And this is someone that is going to slot in with Justin Herbert. He's going to have an opportunity to become the number 1 receiver on this team. I still think for a 1-year type of player, certainly for redraft could be a steal, is going to be Josh Palmer. But Ladd McConkey is going to have an opportunity to very quickly have a serious role in this offense. And people talk about Jim Harbaugh and how they're certainly going to run the ball more, which they will. They drafted Joe Alt in the first round. They're going to look to run the ball, but they can't just avoid passing the football, especially when you have a quarterback as good as Justin Herbert. And so I think that gives Ladd McConkey, a nice spot to make a big impact, both for real life and for fantasy football. So I think this is someone that, he doesn't have a great production profile coming out of college. Never had a 1,000-yard season or anything like that. So that's a little bit concerning, but still very high-level player, good athlete coming out of Georgia. And, I think you'll see in some leagues that people have him as high as potentially 10 in their rankings, but certainly probably no later than 15. So somewhere in this, 10 to 15 range, I think is a great spot for Ladd McConkey, and he'll be a very strong 201, which is where I have him ranked in rookie drafts. Next up, starting tier 5 and checking in at number 14 overall in my rankings, I have wide receiver Keon Coleman, who went to the Buffalo Bills with the first pick in the second round. And this is someone that, is not a very strong separator. We talked about that at length throughout the pre-draft process, but still good athlete. Despite the slower 40-yard dash time, he had the strongest or the fastest gauntlet time at the combine, a drill that Puka Nacua did the best in last season. So there's your little connection there. Not to say that they're similar players because they have actually very different play styles, but Keon Coleman is going to be a very good red zone threat. Strong hands, good at the catch point. He's, a bigger bodied guy, and look, Buffalo needed a receiver. Josh Allen has to have somebody to throw the ball to, and, Khalil Shakir was not going to be this team's wide receiver one heading into the season. So, Keon Coleman is going to have a huge opportunity to, capture that number one role in this offense. And I think simply being tied to Josh Allen and getting strong draft capital is going to push him up draft boards regardless of the poor analytical profile. So there will certainly be people that, do not want to draft him or they have him pushed down in their second round because of those analytical concerns. But I'm happy to take the risk at this stage in the draft at 14 overall, given that he's going to be tied to Josh Allen and is going to have every chance in the world to assert himself as the number one receiver on that team. Coming in at number 15, also in tier 5, I'm going to go with Ricky Pearsall, wide receiver who went to San Francisco with the 31st pick overall at the back of the first round. A little bit of a surprise. I think that he was a little bit overdrafted, but Ricky Pearsall is somebody that has kind of been a favorite of the film community throughout the last few months, several months leading up to the draft. And this is somebody that is a strong route runner, good hands, and was a pretty consistent, producer at Florida. So was never one of these guys that just blew you away with incredible production numbers, but just a solid, steady guy that, goes to a good offense, a good team that should know how to use him well. My biggest concern with Ricky Pearsall, and the reason that I have him at 15 and not at 11 or 12, is they haven't actually made a trade yet with one of their top two receivers. So right now, at best, Ricky Pearsall is going to be the number 3 receiver on the 49ers, which, certainly will have some value. But, when you factor in Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle, Christian McCaffrey out of the backfield, those are 4 other players that would be above Ricky Pearsall in the pecking order. So as it stands today, I'm a little bit wary of him in the, what you'll get in his rookie season. I think his longer-term profile is certainly better than his immediate, outlook. But that would certainly change if San Francisco turns around and trades Brandon Ayuk or Deebo Samuel at some point before the season begins. So be on the lookout for that. I think it's unfortunate that they didn't make a trade during the draft. The same could even be said with the Bengals and T. Higgins with, not making any moves there. But if one of those players, both either Samuel or Ayuk, are traded, I think the situation for Ricky Pearsall becomes exponentially better being tied to Brock Purdy and the Kyle Shanahan offense. And at number 16 in these ranks, the last player in Tier 5 is probably the most difficult player to rank out of every single player in this entire draft, and that is Michael Penix Jr., quarterback out of Washington and formerly Indiana, who was drafted 8th overall in the first round by the Atlanta Falcons, who I think everyone in the universe sort of let out a collective, what the heck is going on after this pick was read by the commissioner, because Atlanta just paid Kirk Cousins a whole bunch of money. 4-year, $180 million contract. Now, only essentially the first 2 years are guaranteed. There's a little bit of money guaranteed. I believe it's, I can't remember if it's $90 or $100 million total. I think it's $100 million that's guaranteed in this deal, 10 of which is in year 3. So, Atlanta will be able to move on from Cousins before that contract is up. There's a very clear opportunity to cut him after year 2. But at the same time, Michael Penix Jr. as a 24-year-old prospect, if you're going to commit to him sitting on the bench for 2 seasons, and taking over as a 26-year-old rookie, I think that's, a wild way to view the situation. If you're the Falcons front office, I'm not sure that I love that process. I don't know that I would have made the same decision. I think if you were dead set on taking a quarterback to sit behind Kirk Cousins for a couple seasons, that J.J. McCarthy would have been the better pick because he's a couple years younger. Could have, used a year or 2 to learn before taking the field. But, it's tough with, Penix Jr. being an older prospect and brand new quarterback signing. I don't really understand the move. Even if in principle I get the idea of, having a good backup quarterback and being set at the position for the future. But for a team that, probably thinks it can make the playoffs and can win a division and make some noise after signing Kirk Cousins, I just don't know that this was the best move, or certainly that they had to take him at 8 overall. I think they could have traded back a few spots and still made the same selection. But it's tough. It's tough for Atlanta and their fans. It's tough for Michael Penix because he's not going to get the opportunity to play right away. And it obviously is tough for Kirk Cousins because now there's all this noise of, well, they just took a quarterback in the top 10. So if Kirk Cousins doesn't produce and, doesn't prove himself to be a playoff level quarterback, there's going to be calls for change. So that's going to be difficult for everyone in this entire situation. The only instance here where I think I would be more understanding of the pick would be if Atlanta knows, hey, Kirk Cousins, the recovery on the Achilles injury is not going well. And hey, we need to have a guy that's ready to go because Cousins isn't going to be able to. But we've not heard anything to indicate that Kirk Cousins won't be ready to go or that he isn't progressing through his recovery at the proper rate. And, because of that, there has to have been a better move here than taking Michael Penix Jr. 8th overall. And it stinks for Dynasty. It stinks for fantasy football because, here's a guy that, could have been a starting quarterback as a rookie. He could have gone to Vegas. He could have gone to Denver. There are other teams he could have gone to. And obviously Denver solved their quarterback solution with Bo Nix. But, Vegas needed someone. There were other teams that certainly could have taken Michael Penix where he would have had a chance to play sooner. I mean, even the Jets, how long is Aaron Rodgers going to play? Now, certainly we've seen how that works out. Aaron Rodgers is not a fan of, having his teams take a quarterback in the first round while he's still there. But I just don't know that Kirk Cousins is far enough into the career where you really seriously have to find his replacement this soon. So to me, it signals that, there's either some sort of concern about Cousins' play or his injury, and coupled with the fact that they just really, really love Michael Penix. So in that sense, he goes to a team that really clearly likes him. So that's nice. And he certainly is at a quarterback, or is at a position of need by being a quarterback. So I can't let him fall too far in this, in these rankings, because he did go top 10. A top 10 quarterback, by all accounts, should be going in the top half of a, Superflex rookie draft. So this is sort of an odd, rare, unique situation where I don't have Michael Penix going that high. If you're a contender and you have, the ability to wait a season or 2 or even 3 before you need Michael Penix to see the field, go ahead and spend that second round pick on him. But, how many teams realistically want to wait 2 or 3 seasons before their player even sees the field? So tough to kind of justify that from a fantasy perspective, but as a quarterback that goes top 10, he does still check in at number 16 in my ranks. Now moving on to tier number 6, and we have our second running back off the board, and checking in at number 17 is Trey Benson, who went in the 3rd round, 66th overall to the Arizona Cardinals. And it's clear kind of what Arizona sees from the situation. He's going to come in and, play second fiddle to James Conner for a year. And then I would imagine Trey Benson becomes the starter full-time in 2025. So not somebody that you're necessarily going to get a ton of rookie production from, barring an injury to James Conner, which certainly could happen. But, a solid play for somebody in 2025 that, got solid draft capital going in the third round on day 2 and to an offense that should be improved. I mean, this is a team that I would expect to take some pretty significant offensive strides after adding Marvin Harrison. And, Trey Benson will certainly help that offense as well to take a little bit of the load off of James Conner. But this is kind of the range for him, would be that mid-second round for Trey Benson. Next at number 18, I have Xavier Legette out of South Carolina, who went with the final pick, 32 overall in the first round, to the Carolina Panthers, who traded up one spot to get him, which was an interesting move. But they must have wanted to secure that fifth-year option and were probably a little bit worried that Buffalo would take him. So Xavier Legette, one of those one-hit wonders in college, just 4 years of doing nothing, followed by a fifth season where he was incredible at South Carolina, just awesome production. But there is certainly something to worry about with that profile from Xavier Legette. But I think, in the mid-second round, 18th overall, I think that's a perfectly fine spot to take a shot on a player who did go in the first round. So, and a team that really needs somebody to step up at wide receiver. They traded for Deontay Johnson, and they have Adam Thielen, who's, in the twilight of his career, but they need somebody to step up as a wide receiver 1. I don't foresee Jonathan Mingo ever being much more than a wide receiver 3 or 4 on that team. So the opportunity will be there for Xavier Legette. You just have to hope that Bryce Young can take the next step and show some signs of improvement in year 2, which would certainly help Legette and his long-term prospects. And coming in at number 20, the final player in Tier 6 is Roman Wilson, wide receiver out of Michigan, who went to the Pittsburgh Steelers with the 84th overall pick, third round draft capital for him. And this is a guy that, is going to have the chance to become the wide receiver 2 next to George Pickens, whether it's Russell Wilson throwing the ball or Justin Fields. That remains to be seen. But either way, Roman Wilson has shown that he can be productive in a run-first offense, which Pittsburgh will likely have with Arthur Smith at OC, and he's a good blocking wide receiver, so he's going to be on the field, and he adds, some speed as well. So I think it's a pretty good landing spot. Pittsburgh generally over the years has been a pretty good team at drafting wide receivers, so I like the fit. He gets, day 2 draft capital. He went a little bit later than I expected, but, still third round pick and is going to have an opportunity to be a contributor and a starter on that Steelers offense, which I think makes him a fine second-round pick in your rookie drafts. Now, starting off Tier 7, we have a run here of about 5 players. So finishing out, we'll finish out with these players on today's episode, and then I'll maybe name drop a couple sleepers or 2, and then we're going to do a full show on sleepers and, later round guys next week. But I wanted to make sure I got through the first 2 rounds, which after this 7th tier will take us through our top 25. So 2 rounds plus 1. And kicking off this tier at number 21 is Blake Corum, running back from Michigan, who went to the LA Rams in the 3rd round, 83rd overall pick. And it's tough for fantasy because obviously, Kyron Williams there was awesome for fantasy and is going to presumably be the starting running back again this year. And Blake Corum, he gets that 3rd round, day 2 draft capital that we love to see from running backs, but he goes to a situation where he's almost assuredly going to be in the committee at best. And it's tough because the Rams have kind of shown that they do like to lean on one guy, and so that committee might not be, as helpful as a committee for fantasy as, we might like, even though he was a 3rd round pick. So in that sense, you could be waiting for a Kyron Williams injury or, a run of, where he's not as productive. But I like it from a real life standpoint. I completely understand what the Rams are doing. I think they wanted to add a better number 2 back. I think you can kiss goodbye to Zach Evans from last year if you're still hanging on hope there. But I think this is a situation that's probably better for actual football than it is for fantasy football. But again, you're still an injury or a strange Sean McVay decision away from having a very helpful fantasy asset. So in that regard, I think as a late second round pick, that's all you can really hope for from a running back perspective, because all the other any running back that goes on the early part of day 2 is going to be drafted higher than this. Anyone that we know is going to be a starter or is on a depth chart where there's not a lot of competition would have gone sooner than the 21st overall pick. So I think this is about par for the course in terms of a running back who, is going to need some help to be, somebody that you can put into a fantasy lineup. But I do like the potential there. And, I do like the offense there with the Rams. So Blake Corum comes in at number 21. At number 22, we have Adonai Mitchell, who fell out of the first round and fairly deep into the second round as well. He went 52nd overall to the Indianapolis Colts. And this is someone who, quite frankly, I think where he was drafted and where he slots in my rookie rankings is much more appropriate than where he was being looked at prior to the NFL draft. This was someone talked about as a first-round pick in real life, a first-round pick in rookie drafts, in that 9 to 12 range, and I just did not see it. I think his analytics were terrible. Nothing about his profile suggested that he could be a number 1 receiver in the NFL. And so him, being a mid to late second round pick, both in, your dynasty rookie draft and the NFL draft, makes much more sense. I think it's a better position for him to be in. I think he now has a chance to, he'll be the number 2 outside receiver for the Colts. I'm not sure for fantasy that he's going to be someone that is all that helpful, because you do have Michael Pittman, who's going to be the number 1. I still prefer Josh Downs over Adonai Mitchell. So I think Mitchell really becomes the Alec Pierce replacement, which, could be a solid role. Certainly is going to have some big games where he catches a deep ball from Anthony Richardson, but, not a great landing spot and certainly not the draft capital for him. I don't anticipate that I will end up with Adonai Mitchell in a whole lot of leagues because I'm still a little bit skeptical of him. And I actually have a handful of Colts players scattered throughout my numerous dynasty teams. So just somebody that I might not end up a lot with, but, somebody that's worth taking a shot in the back of the second, which again, I think is much more appropriate for him as a prospect. And, you might be able to take advantage of the fact, if you're someone that does like him, if you watch the film and you said, hey, the numbers might not always be there, but I like what I see on film, you might get a really good value on Mitchell in your rookie drafts, because I do think he's going to be available for you a lot of the time in the mid to late second round. And checking in at number 23, another player who fell considerably in the draft, projected as a day 2 pick, ended up falling to the beginning of day 3, is Troy Franklin, who was picked in the 4th round by the Denver Broncos, pick 102 overall. And while falling certainly was, not great, both for, Troy Franklin himself and the dynasty community, he ended up in probably about the best situation possible for someone that did fall to the 4th round, because not only did he land on a team that certainly needs a wide receiver 2, he ends up with Bo Nix, his college quarterback that he's certainly, used to playing with. They have a strong connection, evidenced by Troy Franklin's outstanding, production from last season. So I really do like the landing spot. I think it gives him a chance to succeed and be one of those, rare day 3 players that, ends up being useful for fantasy football. And being able to get him at the 2-3 turn in your rookie drafts, I think is great value, because, prior to the draft, he was being looked at as a 1-2 turn kind of guy. So, the size is a little bit of a concern with the weight, and doesn't have the best hands. I think I see him as, some similarities to Jameson Williams, but, this is a guy that certainly can make an impact on Denver's offense, which needs a playmaker next to Courtland Sutton. We don't know what Marvin Mims will be yet, so having a familiar face for Bo Nix is awesome for all parties involved, and should help both Knicks and Troy Franklin be in the best possible scenario to succeed. Number 24 and the final player in the second round for me right now is Jalen Wright. And he is a running back that went to the Miami Dolphins in the fourth round, pick 120 overall. And I went back and forth with this pick, whether to have him at 24 or 25, but they're still in the same tier, both in tier 7. And ultimately, I just think that Jalen Wright is somebody that probably replaces Raheem Mostert. And, you can kiss goodbye to Jeff Wilson and some of the other running backs on that roster. It's going to be a committee between Devon Achane and Jalen Wright, in my opinion. But I think you do need to be wary that it could take some time to get there because Raheem Mostert is still there. He's under contract. I don't foresee them getting rid of Raheem Mostert this year. I think this is a situation where Jalen Wright probably begins the year as the number 3 and then works his way in throughout the season, and then probably isn't all that useful for fantasy this year. But in 2025, I think that's where his value probably improves. Post Mostert can be a solid committee runner, very explosive. He fits the Miami offense perfectly, and can complement that offense as a whole, just full of speed. And so it makes all the sense in the world that Jalen Wright ended up in Miami. It's kind of similar to Xavier Worthy ending up in Kansas City. Both those teams have really put speed to good use in their offenses. So I like the fit. It could have been a little bit better in terms of draft capital, but still fourth round, not horrible for running backs. I think we've seen a little bit of a push back where fourth round running backs still have a little bit of a better chance to succeed in the NFL, but generally speaking, day 3 running backs are just, they're tough in rookie drafts. They tend to just be throwaway picks. Every now and then you get someone that, that hits, but, the odds do tend to be low. I think, so if you decide to go with a day 2 receiver, somebody that went in the third round instead, or one of these other positions, I certainly don't fault you. I think you could go any of the next 3 players on this list. You could certainly go with, including number 25, in my rankings, the last player in tier 7, and that's Ben Sinnott, tight end to the Washington Commanders. He went in the second round, 53rd overall, and I went back and forth between Wright and Sinnott. There is a decent chance I end up flipping Sinnott back to 24 and right back to 25, but again, they're in the same tier, same bucket, and Sinnott was the number 2 tight end off the board. He went before Jatavian Sanders, and he goes to a team that desperately needs another tight end. They did sign Zach Ertz, but he's probably more just a veteran presence at this point. I don't know that you can really rely on him as a starter. So I would imagine that we will very quickly, at some point during the season, see that switch from Ertz to Sinnott. So I like the potential. He lands with a rookie quarterback in Jaden Daniels. So good fit there. And then just to throw out the other 2 names, since I did say, you could, and these players could end up in tier 7 as well, but Jermaine Burton at 26, third round pick at receiver to the Bengals, and then Marshawn Lloyd is at number 27, third round pick to the Green Bay Packers. They might sneak into my tier 7. I currently have them in tier 8. But again, if you're somebody that really relies on draft capital, having those 2 that went in the third round over a guy like Jalen Wright that went in the fourth, or if you're not a fan of taking tight ends in the top 2 rounds of a rookie draft, you can make the switch there. But that's how I see it right now. That is, we ended up going top 27, but so a little bit more than 2 rounds of rookie picks, and that should give you a pretty good feel for how the first and second round should go, and I would imagine that's how it will go in most of your rookie drafts. And that doesn't mean that these rankings are going to be set or that everyone is going to have the same top group in the early first. I mean, just in the couple leagues that have already begun the drafts, for me, I think we've seen different top 5 scenarios in each league. I've seen Marvin Harrison fall to number 3 in a league. I saw Jaden Daniels go to number 2. I've seen, receivers go at 2, 3, and 4. So there is going to be some variety. Everyone in your league is going to be a little bit different depending on, how they are at the quarterback position in the first round. So, be flexible, have your rankings, have your tiers, know how you want to maneuver. Don't be afraid to trade, back a pick or two. A lot of people forget, you can trade back one spot. You don't have to make a huge jump. You don't have to go from, 5 to 10. You can go from 5 to 6. You can go from 7 to 8. Any of those types of scenarios. You can go from 3 to 4 if you're indifferent between Neighbors and Daniels. So explore those trade possibilities, and don't reach on players that went day 3 too high in your drafts. I think that's more what the 3rd and 4th round are for, is to take those shots on your sleepers and whatnot. A couple sleepers, just because we have a minute here before we'll sign off. I think a very popular sleeper is going to be Kamani Vidal from the Chargers. I think he's somebody that will probably go mid to late 3rd round in most leagues. Running back that went in the 6th round to the Chargers. The success rate for a 6th round pick is extremely low, but pretty solid scenario that Vidal is walking into. I think Jatavian Sanders is another one that went 4th round to the Panthers at tight end. He's probably going to go somewhere in the 3rd round, and he's got some potential. And then if you really want to dig deep and look at some potential 4th round guys, I think there's probably a trio or even a quad of running backs that you could look at that went in the 5th and 6th round that I have projected for as mid to late 4th round picks in your rookie drafts. And that's Audric Estime to the Broncos, Tyrone Tracy to the Giants, Rasheen Ali to the Ravens, and Dylan Laube to the Raiders. So there's a couple of deep sleepers for you that will go in the 4th round of your rookie draft. A couple guys in the 3rd round there, but there you have it. That is our final 2024 rookie rankings through the first 2 rounds plus. Thank you for listening. I appreciate you making it this far in the show. And if you did, go follow us on Twitter. Leave us a comment. Tell us what you thought of the show. Give us your thoughts. What rankings do you agree with or disagree with the most? I'll follow you back on the Twitter machine, and I look forward to talking to everybody. And most of all, enjoy your rookie drafts. Soak it in, and because again, this is all supposed to be fun. So enjoy those drafts, have a good time, and I hope you guys all land the players that you want to land on your team. And we'll talk to you all next week as we get into more sleepers and rookies as we are fully into rookie draft season. Thank you all for listening. See you all next week.